Back on June 20th, 2022, a major incident occurred. Blake Lamond, a top-tier executive at Google, announced that their creation, Lambda AI, had become sentient. This claim had been hinted at before, but this time it was firm. The outcome? A storm of debate and ultimately his departure from Google. What's truly intriguing here isn't the discussion about AI sentience, but why a person would risk everything, livelihood, income, even health insurance, for the progression of technology. It's important to remember that other forms of sentience have been recognized in the natural world, in bees, animals, plants, fungi, throughout scientific history, long before humans even appeared on Earth. However, the debate around AI seems to overshadow our precious biodiversity. The real question I'd like to ask you is, what does a world that works for everyone look like to you? This question has been circulating for over 70 years, and it's the one we need to tackle today. Now let's welcome the real Marc Buckley to continue this enlightening conversation with you.
Fabulous. No technical issues there. I'm so thankful to be here today. So it was almost 1 year exactly I was here at I spoke at BLOCKCHANCE every year for the last 5 years, but I was here in the Congress Hall for Deloitte. Deloitte had 3,000 people on the stage upstairs that were all consultants for Deloitte talking about the future of models and where we're going in the future. And I spoke to them about ESG. I spoke to them about sustainable development goals. I spoke to them about the models of the future. And the reason why I'm here today to talk to you, and this AI said it so nicely, is we have a lot of big, huge questions going on in our world that we're asking us. What are the models of the future? How do we get there? Do we need to meditate some more to get there? Do we need to sing some songs to get there? What are the models that progress us into the future of humanity? So I'm showing you a couple hints because the models already exist. They're the core models, the way the world has always worked before human beings were even here. And as us as human beings discover those models, we will understand how to get on the right side of history using innovation, using BLOCKCHANCE, using artificial intelligence. So I don't know how many of you know, but I, about 5 years ago, hired Soul Machines to do an AI for me. Cost about $200,000, and it still isn't done. I created that video that you just saw within 3 hours. Do you understand the exponential curve that we've just seen and the cost parity that has gone down? The biggest question I want you to ponder today as I'm speaking, I want you to ask this question for yourself, and I want you to think about it. What does a world that works for everyone look like for me? Not for your mother, not for your father, not for your president, not for your mayor, not for your religious leader, and not for your community. What does a world that works for everyone look like for you? And don't let your answer be influenced by those around you or anything else. Ask yourself this question as we go through this talk. I've conducted a social experiment, started here at BLOCKCHANCE, and I've spoken to 3,500 people on video recorded asking them this question. Now, the reason I mention this question is it's 70 years old, and it comes from this book that I'm showing here. There's a couple versions of it. The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And I'm just going to hold it sideways so you can see how thick this and heavy this book is. It's not biblical in proportions. It's not academic volumes that are heavy and hard to read. It's thin. I almost tease and say it's a toilet read. If you open this book that was written in 1967, on the inside cover of that book is R. Buckminster Fuller's Why. And he asks the question and answers it to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without the ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. Now that was his why, that was his purpose and his answer to that question. But I want you to know, 1967, he'd actually been talking about it well before the 1960s, and he is the one who did the geodescent dome. This geodescent dome is at the World's Fair, which occurred in 1967 in Montreal, Canada. And he hosted what we call the World Game inside that dome during the World's Fair in 1967, and brought people together from all around the world to discuss and ask that question to find out what a world looks like that works for everyone. So here at BLOCKCHANCE and on a podcast I do, I've asked 3,500 people on video, recorded it. Every time I've asked them this question, I've recorded it, that same question. And it's really interesting, the social experiment that's occurred through asking these questions. Most of these people are authors, attendees, other people in the blockchain, crypto space, environmentalism that I've asked this. And let me tell you what some of the results are. Only 7 of the 3,500 plus people that I asked that question came up with a similar answer. Only 7. And it wasn't exactly the same. A lot of people, I started to worry. I thought they were going to have a grand mal seizure or that they were on fire, because it's almost like I could see smoke coming out of their ears and their eyes started to roll back in their head and they started to stutter because they didn't know the answer to that question. And that's okay. If you don't know the answer to that question, that's perfectly fine. It's not a trick, it's not a test, but I want you to know, if you're not okay with the world around you, the systems around you, and the way our world is going, guess what? Then you should find out the answer for yourself to that question and start speaking to your politicians, your leaders, your family, your religion, to make sure that the future we reach is the one that you would like to. Because if you don't, guess what? If you don't know the answer to that question, someone else has jumped into that spot and is guiding you on the future that they feel is right for you. And I tell you what, especially the pandemic, especially the Brexit, especially the Ukraine war, especially the supply chain issues, especially the finance issues in our world, I'm not happy with any of those systems. I don't like how they're going. But if I don't say something, if I don't do something, if I don't create something new, guess what? I'm supporting those bad systems to stay alive and to keep going. The way to get out of those is to create something new. So there's one more twist to this question. I think you would have guessed it. I asked ChatGPT that question. And you know how there's that little refresh button on the bottom? I hit it about 120 times, and guess what? Came up the same 120 times. So what does that say about us? So the AI who introduced me basically said, it's went sentient, and Blake Lamont was fired and lost his livelihood. The key point is human beings are willing to lose their livelihood, their employment, their jobs for AI, for technology. Is that good? I don't know. I think if it's used as a tool, if it's used for something good for humanity, it could very well be. But if it's not, what does that say? Have we domesticated technology, or has that technology and AI domesticated us? And we're the robots, we're the artificial intelligence now. So it's interesting that it has the answer and can help humanity guide in the right direction. So the United Nations, this is Stockholm back in 51 years ago, was where sustainable development was first discussed. And it's now the 50th or 51st anniversary, because this was last year, of the first climate conference for the United Nations, where we were talking about sustainable development, about the future, about innovations, and this question that I'm asking you: what does a world that works for everyone look like? I can give you the answers because there's no trick questions here today. Before this decade is out, we must achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, in order to move forward to the next step in the future of our other models, our other infrastructural help to springboard off into much better models for different futures. So at the World Economic Forum this year, with PricewaterhouseCoopers and Future IO Institute, we launched this book. It's called Before This Decade Is Out. And the reason it's called that, and the reason I show that to you, and Anna sitting in the front, she saw this live. She did an interview about the book. The reason I wrote this book in conjunction with PricewaterhouseCoopers is because we have 1 decade left to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by December 2030. That's 7 years. And it's a meme on the same twist as John F. Kennedy when he stood in front of Congress in America and said, I need millions of dollars because before this decade is out, we want to send men to the moon. And they didn't have the technology, the innovation, the computer power, or even the money, but they were able to do it less than 8 years to get people on the moon. We're at that same point in time. A lot of things are happening in our world, very crazy. We do have the technology, we have the power, we have the innovations to solve some of these problems, but we need to start thinking differently. We need to start applying them, and we have 7 years left. I want to show you a little video. It's based off of this book from many greats, this co-written by many people: Desmond Tutu, Muhammad Yunus, Al Gore, Paul Pullman. This is Kim Pullman, who curated the book, but she did a nice little video to talk about the transformations that we're going through.
Around the world, people are waking up. They know we need change, and not just at the edges. We need to change our systems, not just our straws. But the question remains, how does change happen? In the face of these mounting crises, it can feel hopeless, but it shouldn't. Because there is a blueprint for change, buried deep in nature. It's a story of transformation, encoded at the deepest level of being, the imaginal cell. A cell that contains within it a vision of something new, of something better. The caterpillar, while alive, consumes. But this cannot go on forever. Everything has an end. Everything has a tipping point. All that is left is decay. But from this place of darkness, something new can be born. At first, the caterpillar fights this new presence,
What we want is more learning in schools and less activism.
seeing it as a threat, clinging to its old form. But the imaginal cells persist in spite of this. They begin to emit a common frequency. They cluster, they form collectives, until eventually they reach a critical mass. They can no longer be opposed. In time, the old yields to the new, and something beautiful emerges. So know this, the future is not foreclosed. Alternative worlds are possible. A world where hope matters more than despair. A world where care matters more than profit. A world where solidarity matters more than self-interest. Change can happen, and change is coming. Are you in?
Absolutely, I'm in. And this last slide here says, treat others and the planet as you wish to be treated. That's the golden rule. That's the core key to life on Earth. We've seen it throughout history of humanity, that golden rule is a model that we've repeated over and over again. What I'm seeing in this culminating collective consciousness and this rise around the world is that there's downloads occurring all over the world of people who are fed up with the systems. This video said systems, transformation, and this imaginal cell transformation. We go from the caterpillar to the chrysalis and then emerge a butterfly. The difference between a project or change is really interesting because, the difference between true transformations is that when you have change or a project, you can always change and stop that project. It has a start and a stop. But a transformation is like that journey of the caterpillar. Once you go through that chrysalis process, and that's the pivotal moment we're in now, you can never jump back as a butterfly into that chrysalis and emerge out as a caterpillar. That's true transformation. And that's what we need to go through now instead of coming up with a new idea, new projects or change, because they can be derailed by economics, by events that occur in the world, by climate change, by financial destruction, and by wars. The downloads that we're seeing all over the world, I just did a workshop this February at the World Government Summit, and I had Vitalik from Ethereum and Satguru from India together on a call having a dialogue with each other. Freaking amazing, right? And then just a couple weeks ago, Vitalik went to Montenegro to start an entirely new system, a new governance, a new city in Montenegro. Why did he do that? Well, the reason he did that is because where he's at in the world, he's not seeing the system, the ability to create the world or the future that he wants. So he has to find a location or a decentralized way to get it into the universe so that we can apply it. Because if you just take an idea or change and plug it into a bad infrastructure or a bad system, guess what happens? It collapses. It doesn't work. You have to have an entirely new system, backbone, infrastructure in order to get to where you need to go. The other downloads that we're seeing is just, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, May 15th, 17th, in the European Union, they had this big event called Beyond Growth. And Ursula von der Leyen, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, got up and for almost an hour, she talked about a book that was written in 1972 called The Limits to Growth. And that book in the environmental space was created by MIT modelers of the systems dynamic modeling, the Club of Rome, and the Volkswagen Foundation. The reason that's interesting is in the environmental space, they called it the Climate Bible, because it talked about if we don't change, if we don't build a new system, what's going to happen, and everything in there has come true. And she talked about that we need new economic models, we need new systems, we need blockchain, we need new forms of DeFi, we need new economic models. And she had the world's leading thought leaders, technologists, innovators, futurists, and economists, ecological economists there. Then just 1 week later, Change Now, May 25th through the 27th in Paris, one of the world's leading events saying, what? We need a change. Let's change our systems entirely. And I'll tell you, these are not small moments. That's why I'm showing them to you, because there are some major downloads or major fluctuations, things happening in our world that aren't esoteric. They're not hocus pocus. There's a solid math and science behind them, and there's a better model behind them that we are fed up with our current systems, so we're looking for change. So we've heard about whatever, the European Green Deal. We've heard about ESG and CSRD and all the human rights due diligence, reporting due diligence directives, and the things coming down the line that were all created based off of the backbone of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we see some of those topics and those change in those systems coming about, but we're still a little bit behind on following them. Where we want to go, and I'm just going to tell you so that we can kind of talk about it more, is to the symbiocene. Because that slide that I showed you right here is very interesting. We're only on one planet. When you throw something away, it doesn't go away anywhere. It remains on this planet. But the interesting thing is how do we have this image? What is this image? This image is sheer technology. It's innovation. Had we not gone to the moon, looked towards the stars, we wouldn't even have this image. We wouldn't have the computing power, the technology. So I'm not saying we don't need innovations. Anytime humanity is transformed from one age or one epoch to the other, guess what? We've done it with an innovation. The steam engine, the pneumatic tire, the combustible vehicle, the printing press, on and on. And now we need another transformation. One to get us out of that chrysalis into a new epoch. Because currently we're stuck in the Anthropocene of man-made human climate change, but where do we want to go? We want to go to the symbiocene. And where does that come from? That comes from this book from Glenn Albrecht called Earth Emotions. We need new words for a new world. We're stuck in this anthropocenic terminology and vocabulary about how bad humans are on the planet and how bad we are with climate change. We need to generate new narratives of how great we are and how we can get to the symbiocene, a new age or epoch out of the Anthropocene. And the other book is really the key about exponential growth and technology. So some might think quantum computing, emerging technologies, blockchain, whatever it is, are fast and exponential technologies. I want to dispel that myth a little bit and tell you that there's a natural ecological phenomenon that is faster than quantum computing. It is beyond quantum tunneling, and it is a super duper exponential. It's not just exponential, it's a super exponential. And that is symbiosis. It's a source of evolutionary human innovation. And when we apply that into our lives and into our organizations, our business models, guess what? No capitalistic, no extractive model can even come close to the success we will have on changing the systems, on having our technologies and innovations survive into the future. And that actually comes from Lynn Margulis, and she came up with symbiosis. She said, natural selection, survival of the fittest, only the strong survive is bullshit. That's never how our world has worked. It is through symbiosis. That's how our world works. And it's through cooperation, collaboration. That's how our world works. Not through survival of the fittest, severe competition, and only the natural selection, only the strong survive. There's one last thing here that is important when we talk about exponential, and that is in all life, all biology, all life and living systems, biology, ecology, environment, all living systems, 1 + 1, not rarely, never, ever, 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 ever will equal 2. In math and some science, 1 plus 1 is 2. But in all living systems, 1 plus 1 is what they call a super exponential. And it's an ecological phenomenon. It's always that way. And that's talked about in Scale by Jeffrey West, and many times with many scenarios where organizations have applied that in their technologies and in their innovation and in their organizational model, and they've come out smelling much richer, much more profitable, and better for the environment and humanity. The other one is a biblical report called the Stern Review, the Economic of Climate Change, where they've done thousands of case studies of organizations who've applied ESG, SDGs, and this living model into their organization and into their technologies to make sure that they come out a lot better at the end. So the major download that's going on in the world is we're shifting our economic models, our finance models. And I've spoken before at BLOCKCHANCE about the Sustainable Development Goals. I've even talked about my manifesto that I wrote for the United Nations about the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm not going to harp on that here, but what I think that has been missed out in the past is that people don't know that is an entirely new ecological economic model. And so it's not this way that we look at it. It's actually this way that we look at it because it's really related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this is how we view the world moving forward. Now, I've talked about systems change and transformation. What most people don't know is that there are 6 major transformations needed to go through to change to that epoch of the symbiocene. And the only one business, technology, and organizations and cities talk about is number 6, the digital revolution, the digital transformation. But there's 5 other transformations needed for humanity to get out of the Anthropocene into the symbiocene. Education, transformation of health and well-being. And all 6 of those transformations are tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. But don't get bored because they've been around before the Sustainable Development Goals. Matter of fact, they were around 20 years before the Sustainable Development Goals. We've always needed to make 6 major transformations to get into that different future. It's part of futurism. It's about future tools and foresight. And there's a set dollar amount, and that dollar amount in 2015 was $90 trillion US dollars. Most people don't know that dollar amount, and it's now at 96 trillion US dollars. And if you want to tell me that's an annual of $6 trillion every single year, but if you want to tell me that's not an ecological economic model, an entirely new economic system, then I would ask you, what's your quantifier? What's your rationale that the SDGs aren't a new system? The way we get that is we know business as usual, the high carbon scenario, just regular development when we build buildings, roads, infrastructure, cars, materials, that's what we call a high carbon scenario or business as usual. In the development sector, that's an entirely sector of economy in and of itself. It's called the built environment or the development sector. And so if we do it in a sustainable way, a regenerative way, guess what? That's also an economic model, and it's only about 15, 16 trillion US dollars more, with much better outcomes and a solid brand new infrastructure that's not business as usual, the same as we've always done it. And that's how we transform and change. Well, do we have that money? Yes. This is COP26 in Glasgow, the first week of the climate conference on Thursday. Mark Carney, Rishi Sunak, on the first week of the United Nations Climate Conference, committed 130 trillion US dollars. Now, this year, we're at COP28 in Dubai, and we will make it. So there's a lot of rules and policies and things that have built up, but it's all about reframing economics, reframing our systems moving forward. And all over the world, these downloads are occurring where people say, I'm going to come up with a new economic model. I'm going to present it. How many people here in the audience can name 4 new ecological economic models, or just any 4 ecological economic models? Can anybody name one? Go ahead and shout it out. I know for a fact everybody knows at least 5 ecological economic models in the world. Somebody raise their hand, please. The donut economy, exactly. Well, let me tell you, I know you might say, well, new ecological economic model, I've never heard of. Circular economy, shared economy, platform economy, donut economics, steady state economics, mission economics, shared economics, well-being economics. There's more than 32 ecological economic models. I haven't even talked about all the shitty ones like neoclassical, classical, micro, macro, extractive, capitalism. There's more than 32, and every week there's new ones coming, and this is from the Club of Rome that has come up with a book that's called Earth for All. And guess what about this model? They've applied 3 ecological economic ideas. One is the donut economics from Kate Raworth. 2 is the Club of Rome's systems dynamic model, where the new World Model 3 back in 1972, that World Model 3 was developed by MIT, systems dynamic modeling, blockchain technology, emerging tech, and planetary boundaries from Stockholm Resilience Center. And that really comes from the second father of ecological economics. I studied at the University of Maryland with Herman Daly, ecological economics. And he sadly passed away last year, October 28th. But he came up with steady state economics and beyond growth and spoke about that. But just so that you don't think, these are all what I call the shitty, bad, classical economic models, the ones that hopefully we're trying to change here. And if I were to ask you, how many economic models are you living in your life today? Most people would also have a seizure, start stuttering, capitalism, extractive, they don't know. And they definitely don't know what models will replace those shitty models. But I'll tell you, there's plenty of options. And so if you're going to be an innovator, if you're going to be a business person, when you have a business, when you have an innovation that transforms and changes the world, guess what? You better know economics. Because if you don't, you're always going to be wondering where that money's coming from, who the money's coming from, where you're going to bank, right? So you better be a good economist or have an understanding of what's available out there and what kind of model you're going to transform humanity with your super blockchain innovation, your DeFi or your web3, right? And then the second is you better be someone who knows all about impact innovations for purpose that change humanity and change the world. And third, you have to be a futurist. And you have to know what a world looks like that works for everyone, to you. Because if you don't, then who does? And where is the goal? And what's the roadmap look like to get there? So I could talk about economics and how we get there. From 1447 to 1517, the whole world dealt with single and bottom, double line accounting principles that were made up by a monk, a friar monk. And then 30 years ago, John Elkington came up with the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. That's kind of an idea about business and economics. And just last week, I saw at an event an annual report from a big company, big, huge company, and they quoted the triple bottom line. But the reason I show you this, in 2018, at the 25th anniversary of the triple bottom line, the first time in human history, a sustainable project, a sustainable model has been recalled. John Elkington went in the Harvard Business Review and Forbes, and he said, I'm recalling the triple bottom line because everybody, all organizations are using it as a single accounting principle and bastardizing the system. And so he recalled it, and like with any good recall, you put something new out there, and he said, The new model is the endless re-imperatives, and it is responsibility, resilience, and regeneration. As I wrap up, I'm going to have to skip some slides. The model for life is regenerative platform systems dynamic models. After the Sustainable Development Goals comes the Resilient Development Goals. And we already started that in 2019. So if you're still debating on the 7 years that we have left on the SDGs, just know December 2030 there will be a new model. And I want you to know that there's 3 civilizations that haven't collapsed before in our world. Out of the 32 civilizations we had, early antiquity, Mesopotamia, Incas, Aztecs, Mayas, the Greeks, the Romans, on, there was 32 civilization frameworks in our world before, and all of them collapsed but 3 because of environmental and ecological collapse and because of displacement. All of them collapsed. But all of them collapsed because they were running the exact same model, and that model is a hierarchy model. It's a model that's extractive, it's capitalistic, it's exploitive. Every one of them are running that model. And today, we're still running them in a lot of our organizations, and all over the world, we see that still the same. So that's the first place that we have to change our models and our framework for our civilization, and that is to go from the ego, where man's at the top, and peasants, slaves, and laborers and other species are at the bottom, to eco, and then the final journey of seva, regeneration, selfless service to life, because this is the true way to do it, because you never change things by fighting existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Thank you very much.